This is The Express with Gary Allen, your 360-degree view of the world. Now, here's your host, Gary Allen.
Okay, and welcome everybody to The Express. Gary Allen with you here. Hope you've had a wonderful week since we last met. And I want to thank Randy out there for tuning in. I know he does every week, and he's one of the many people out there who tune in every week. And we do have a great show for you tonight. My guest is a young lady, Debra Gussin, and she is a well-known award-winning songwriter. But before we get to that, just a quick reminder, go to Facebook to Gary Allen, A-L-A-N. You can also catch me on youtube.com at Gary Allen The Express. Thursday night, this program will repeat itself at 7 p.m. on diversitybroadcastnetwork.com and on progressivevoices.com on their demand channel. You can check out all my past shows there. And there will be something coming up very, very soon with 24/7 The Sound. As soon as we get all the legalities worked out, everything will be going along with that. And I do have a new show here on the local market at AM 1510 WMEL.com on Monday nights at 7 p.m. when there's not baseball. That's the only restriction I have. And everybody that works nights there doing an air shift, you either get thrown off the air due to baseball or you get thrown off the air due to basketball, one or the other. So it's either one or the other. I believe my guest has joined us or will be joining us very, very shortly. EW, I think, Debra, are you there? Well, we seem to be having more problems with Skype than anybody wants to deal with. But anyway, my guest tonight is one of the most interesting young women that we've had on this program in a very long period of time. She is extremely, extremely talented, and I can't wait for her to be part of what's going on here. And EW, just let me know when Debra's there, would you please?
You should hear her pop in here in just a brief moment. Okay. There she is.
Oh, there is Debra. All right, Debra, before I bring you on board, let me just let people know who you are. And by the way, before we get into this, I love your little blurb on Facebook. You can't wait to find out information about yourself. I thought that was great. Debra was raised in New York. She had a dual degree from Syracuse University, television production, as well as marketing and management, again from Syracuse, a university that I know well. My mother went there, and she was constantly, unfortunately, she didn't graduate from there. That was way, 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 way back. After working on Mickey Rourke's film Year of the Dragon, she landed a spot at ABC Wide World of Sports, the compelling drama surrounding the thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, which is a joke within itself, invoked a sense of storytelling in Debra, revealing the truth and authenticity that would later be infused into the vibrant scenarios of her songs. Debra continued to be in television, her career in Los Angeles, working on numerous programs, including Daytime Emmy Awards, the Fox Sports News, Wolfgang Puck, and Dr. Phil. While working on the launch of the National Geographic Channel, Debra colleagues introduced her to a multi-platinum lyricist, Marty Panzer, who's worked with Barry Manilow, Kenny Rogers, and many, many others. That lifelong moment unexpectedly launched her into a wide world of songwriting, and we will get into that a little bit later on. Debra was just named Best Lyricist of the 2016 Hollywood Music and Media Awards, having in the adult contemporary song area. And she's also been working recently with Brian Bell of Weezer and his band, The Relationship. Her awards are numerous, everything from the Hollywood Music and Media Awards to the John Lennon Song Contest, the Global Music Awards, the Dallas Awards, the Great American Song Contest. You name it, this young lady has entered the contest and probably won it. She is probably one of the most delightful women that I've ever had the pleasure of meeting and seeing. She knows that. I've said that to her before. Her eyes are like the stars in the sky, and a smile that would light up a room, even if it was at its darkest moment. Debra Gussin, thank you so much for taking a few minutes to join me here and my audience on The Express.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm grateful to be here.
Well, it's always wonderful. I know you've had a very, very, very busy day. And it's sort of like mine. It never stops going when you work in this particular business. Let's revert back. I remember reading here someplace that your mother gave you some advice when you were 12 years old. And what was that advice?
Yes. Well, a lot of things happened when I was 12 in terms of my awareness of things. One was I knew I wanted to be a television producer, even though I had no idea what that meant. Mm-hmm. And I come from a town and upbringing where, if you want to go into a profession, it would be a doctor, a dentist, or a lawyer. And so my mom's advice to me was, hey, you have a big mouth. Why don't you become a lawyer? And she still says that to me. I actually did take some law classes when I was studying television at Syracuse. And I think at the time, she might have felt that way because if I wanted something or if I had a desire to do something, I would probably be able to reason my way, into it. And so maybe that's how she came up with that. But I took some law classes, and it was part of what I needed to do for my TV degree. And I at the time, at that age, I didn't think that that was my strength. I found it interesting, but I didn't think that arguing law was really where I was going to be. Mm-hmm. So it was good to know, but it wasn't anything that now as I got older and I'm more knowledgeable about life, I might be able to argue that point. But at the time I was still too young and I had no life experience to feel that becoming a lawyer was my path.
Yeah, I can tell you honestly, being the brother of a lawyer who prior to being a lawyer, he spent 14 years in the NFL. He worked in the prosecutor's office in Baltimore, Maryland, where he played for the Colts back in the day. And he practiced law for 3, maybe 4 years, went back and took some classes and became a real estate lawyer, and he never looked back. So
I don't know too many people that necessarily love it. I know a lot of people that got law degrees and then went on to other areas of entertainment, and they're very grateful for the knowledge because it makes them better at what they do. And in a way, that's why I got the dual degree at Syracuse. I got a TV degree because I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I also got a business degree in marketing, and I am glad I did that. I did it really for the wrong reasons. I did it sort of to have something to fall back on. Mm-hmm. And because I was good at math, and I just, when you work in TV and creative things, whether or not what you create is good is subjective. And just in case, I wanted those math and science classes because I knew if I got the answer right, I'd get the A.
Yeah,
so I wanted to balance out the grades just in case.
Yeah, I went to 4 different places to college. I was always lousy in math. As a matter of fact, I was talking to one of my best friends today that when I was in high school, I was bored. I couldn't wait to get out of there. In 1970, when I graduated from high school, within 3 months, I was in the Air Force and never looked back. Wow. I just couldn't wait to get out of Hollywood, Florida. It was just not where I wanted to be in life. And I knew there was a big world out there because my dad, who worked for the airlines, and my 2 uncles, I used to travel the world, seeing the world through their eyes and traveling with them on flights and stuff. So, okay. We take you, your mom wanted you to be a lawyer. You decided to go to Syracuse University. You graduate with 2 degrees. But you don't go from Syracuse University today and then tomorrow you're a TV producer. Talk to my audience about that, how the climb that you had to take, because I know Eric Streit, who's a good friend of yours and mine, it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't, unless your father owns the network or something, it doesn't happen. What did you go through to get where you were to eventually be on ABC Wide World of Sports, Dr. Phil, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, there was a huge many years between ABC's Wide World of Sports and Dr. Phil. There was the beginning of that. One was the beginning and one was sort of the end of my TV career. Not the end. I mean, you never know, but that was my last TV gig. I always knew that the 2 things happened and that will kind of weave its way through my entire life when I was 12, other than my mother telling me to be an attorney. One was that I discovered music, specifically music that my sister used to play in her room where I used to hang out all the time. I didn't know this guy's name. I would just hear the songs all the time. And it was a few years, maybe I was 15 or 16 before I knew the guy's name, and his name was Barry Manilow. And the other thing was that I knew I wanted to be a television producer. And Barry, he weaves his way throughout my life, and is the reason I'm a songwriter, and is probably the reason that I ultimately had this sort of the strength and the courage to be a television producer or go into it and go on that TV journey when I did not have one connection. I knew nobody, nothing that was involved in TV in Hollywood. I was in Long Island, New York. And, at the time, there really weren't that many women in TV to even look up to. And so I went to school for it. And even when I went to school, many people had come from high schools that had programs in TV. And so they were way ahead of me. I knew nothing. I just knew that's what I was going to do. And so I spent the 4 years between business classes and TV classes. And when I came out of school, I don't remember how, but I somehow got a job as a production assistant on Year of the Dragon, which was the Michael Cimino, the first film Michael Cimino directed after Heaven's Gate. So it was didn't do too well at the box office. So it was a pretty big film for him. And Mickey Rourke was the star. And I started as an intern, I think, and then the interns became production assistants, and I worked in the production office and casting and then in whatever anybody needed. And then we were on the set and in Manhattan, and that was really exciting. And as with anything in a freelance world, when you're done with the job, you're unemployed again, which is a current theme in TV. But after a while, you get with your people that go on from show to show, and you kind of move along. And a friend of mine from college, her sister knew somebody in human resources at ABC. And so they got me an interview at ABC, and I ultimately ended up in the sports department working with Kurt Gowdy Jr., who was Kurt Gowdy's son. And he was a producer there, and a director, and a guy by the name of Jim Lampley, who's a sports analyst and commentator.
Yes.
I think he's at HBO doing boxing now.
Yeah, he does.
So
he does. He's a very good announcer for boxing, because I used to be a ring announcer in Vegas, and I'd see him every once in a while.
Yeah, so I worked for the three of them as their assistant, and back then they called the secretaries, which I hated because I hated answering phones, but I did it. And one thing that will come into play later in our conversation when it gets to the songwriting world is when I was working for Jim, he was on the road a lot, and he'd get a lot of fan mail. And back then we had typewriters, and I would type out letters responding to all the fan mail. And I guess I got to know his personality pretty well. So I would kind of put in little, parts of his personality into the letter, whether it's an inside joke or something. And one day he comes out of his office with the letters signed, he signed the letters. And he said to me something that it didn't dawn on me till I became a songwriter many, many years later. He said, "You sound more like me than I do."
Mm.
And
that's cool.
That kind of went over my head, but what it meant was I became him. I crawled into his character and was writing from his perspective, which when I work with artists is exactly what I have to do as a songwriter.
Yeah. That's one of the best compliments you can ever have.
I guess it didn't dawn on me at the time very heavily until I started working with artists as a songwriter, obviously many years later. And I thought, I must have somewhere in me, I must have that capability, because I hear that from artists that I work with, like, how did you know? After I would give them a lyric, how did you know? Or that's the story of my life, or that's exactly what I'm going through right now. And I don't know how I know, because in most cases I don't know them very well. I just have a sense, and I crawl into that character and become their voice. That's my job. But the fact that I have that ability is not, I have no idea where that comes from.
But you've always been, according to your bio, you've always been an extremely creative person. Like you said, even growing up, listening to music with your sister and stuff, music and creativity has always been a very important part of your life. When did you recognize, at what age, that, hey, that's what I want to do? I want, you said you wanted to be a producer, and you weren't even sure what that is. But did other people around you think, oh, this girl's nuts? I mean, go be a lawyer, or go be a doctor, or a school teacher, or something. You can't go into show business.
Exactly. That's where the quote from my mom came from. And people that I know I'm still very good friends with became teachers and doctors and dentists and lawyers. And I had no interest in that. I knew I was on a tour of California when I was about 14. And it was kind of like camp, but instead of going to camp, you got on a bus and you with other teenagers and you went across the country. And as soon as I stepped off that bus in California, I knew that's where I wanted to be. We went to Universal Studios and we saw the behind the scenes things, which I didn't know about at the time. And I thought, well, yeah, this is, I understood why I wanted to do that after I decided to do it. But it takes, to get back to your question, it takes many years. So I started out working at ABC Sports, and I had access a year later. My boss was promoted to being the coordinating producer of Wide World of Sports, which was a studio. There was a studio operation, and then there were producers and people around the country and around the world at those sporting events, but it was all controlled from the studio. And so I then had a chance to be inside the studio doing live television and just observing all that, being part of all that. And at times on the weekends in my own time, I would go to some of the sporting events and work on that. And after about 3 years, I thought, at the time, there really wasn't much in terms of production in New York the way there is now. It was news or sports, and I had now gone through sports. And I decided to make the move to LA and start from scratch and get into more production that wasn't sports or news. And came out to LA, and there was an 8-month writer's strike.
Yeah.
So no one was working. But I had those connections in sports, and they needed people in LA for various sporting events, and I was able to keep myself busy worked the Super Bowl that year, doing, production in sports in LA because there was no production going on in terms of TV at the time.
What years were those, Debra?
Oh, late 80s.
That's
late
I
80s.
was late 80s. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd already left LA by then. I was in Chicago at that particular time. We're talking to Debra Gussin, who is a award-winning songwriter, started out as a TV producer, but absolutely a dynamo. I really think, I was saying this to myself today on my way home, I think you probably could have put your mind to be just about anything you wanted to be, and you would be it.
Probably, but I didn't know that. And that's where the Barry Manilow comments come in. I would go to his concerts when I realized who he was, and that I had been listening to his music for many years and not knowing who it was. And my sister took me to the first show, and he would say things in between the songs that I wasn't hearing from anybody in my world, which was, don't give up,
Right.
Things like that. And it's not that anybody wasn't telling me that, it's that people thought I should be doing what was done in my world, and I was thinking Hollywood. And that's not anything that anybody around me had any experience in or connection to. So
Yes.
I was really on my own trying to make this happen. And it was a lot of the encouragement that I would hear coming from him that made me think, well, I'll listen to what he says and I'll keep going and see what happens. And that's how I became a television producer, just really through that sheer will and through not giving up. And I think that's what ultimately I had to apply myself to for songwriting. I was starting from scratch again. And I thought, well, I built a TV career from nothing. How did I do that?
Right.
By focusing, by learning, by always being a student. And that's what I did with my songwriting.
When Eric was on the show, we talked about grit and determination and the willingness, which I've always believed, and I can't remember who told me this. It was 30 years ago when I was in Hollywood. As a matter of fact, it was at Pink's one night, about 2 a.m, and eating hot dogs and having a cream soda. This actor said to me, Gary, the difference between success and failure in this business is your willingness to do what other people won't do.
Right.
And I think that's what propelled Eric and probably propelled you, even though you say you really didn't have a background in it, and there were people that were more qualified because they went to school for it or they had internships here and there and in a few other places. I think sometimes if you're in the right place, right time, and willing to do what's necessary to get it done, even if it's not your job classification, I think people take note of that and they say, hey, this is a person who's willing to really put it together to help this production move forward. And I think people remember that.
I think no matter what, I've gotten my share of coffees. I've made my share of coffee cups for people. I think yes, you have to work hard. I mean, really kind of outwork everybody else. While people were off for the weekend enjoying the movies, I was, on a plane to Chicago to work a horse race at my own expense. Whatever it was, because I wanted, especially back then, I wanted to learn. And so I did my day job there, and I absorbed what I could there. But then I would continue to do things on nights, on weekends, whenever they had something where they needed help. I would do it. And I did it really until I was either going to get to the next level there or move. And I ultimately decided to go to California, that it was the right time to do that.
Yeah, and California is a wonderful place. I know you and I talked about the area that you live in. I know it. It's over by UCLA. Fortunately, I lived over on the other part of town, which I don't know what it looks like today, but where La Brea and Franklin meet, right by the Magic Castle. I don't know if that whole area has been upgraded because of I'm sure the apartment that I paid, I think my roommate and I, who at that time was at A&M Records, the old Charlie Chaplin studios, he was an engineer there. What we paid, I'm sure, is now astronomical. It's probably in the thousands compared to what we paid, which was in the hundreds. But I had a great time there. I really did. And then eventually I moved down off of Melrose Street called North Kings Road, and it was cool because I would work at night and audition during the day, and go and do whatever I had to do, and I enjoyed it. But after a while, I realized this isn't for me. This isn't what I want to be, and I should have stayed in LA and pursued radio instead of continuing with the acting. But at the time, I got married and moved to Chicago, which was not a bad move. It turned out to be a really good move. It was at the time that you were doing some work that on the National Geographic Channel that people introduced you to Marty Panzer, who worked with Barry Manilow and Kenny Rogers. And before we get into Marty, because you decided to take one of his master classes, and that's when the light bulb went on for you. Talk about the gifts that it takes to be a songwriter. I mean, is writing a song the ability to write? Is it a gift for really good songwriters? I mean, I know you have to work at it every day. No matter how good you are at your craft, you still have to work at it. The best violinist in the world, if he takes a couple of days off, he has to get back at it again. But I can whistle a tune all day long in the shower and make up tunes about my little kitty cats here, but it isn't going to amount to anything. I once joked with a guy recently on the air at our radio station here in Cocoa Beach. He was from Nashville, and he was a songwriter. And he said, well, Gary, have you ever written a song? And I jokingly said to him, yes, I wrote a country ballad once that really rose up the charts. He said, oh, what was the title? I said, I can't get over you until you get from underneath him. And he just died laughing because he realized I was telling a joke. I said, no, I can't carry a joke. Is being a songwriter, is it a gift that God gave you, and it just took a while for the light bulb to go on, but you still have to work at the craft?
I'm not one to say that it's a gift God gave other people, but I feel that it is one of the gifts that I have, and it is backed by a lot of work. And as you said, I just read a quote somewhere, I don't remember where, that said, the person who works harder, with less talent will get further than the person with a lot of talent who doesn't work as hard.
Yes. The old saying, yeah.
I think there's nothing that will trump hard work. And, but for me, this was not anything I had a desire to do. So it took me a while to kind of realize that I guess I should continue to pursue this. I wasn't looking to really leave my TV career, but at some point I was. I think before I started on Dr. Phil, I was ready to start thinking about what else could I do, because I had been doing TV for a very long time, and it started to become the same thing, just on a different show. And I didn't feel like there was anything left for me that I still wanted that challenge and that had that hunger for. Yet there was nothing else that I wanted to do other than that my whole life. So I was at a bit of a transition. And when Dr. Phil came along, I knew that was going to be a hit. And I had worked so many years and so hard to work on a show like that. I thought, I can't turn that down. And and it was a very, very tough, environment, because they're, everything they do has excellence, and it was a wild, it was a big machine.
I love it. I love his sayings, Oh, you can't do that. I have a friend of mine in New York who worked for Rosie O'Donnell, Jeanette Barber, and she's basically said the same thing too. It's a grind. It's just, everybody thinks it's glamorous. Or if I say to somebody, like today when I went out to get something to eat tonight, somebody said, "Oh, you work in radio?" I said, "Yeah," and they said, "Boy, that's a glamorous life." I said, "Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. I just work at it every day the way other people do."
It's a journey. You don't really feel. I don't really feel I'm in any kind of glamorous world really until something is over or there's an award nomination and I get to walk down a red carpet. But those moments are like, a needle in a haystack compared to all the hours of work you put into it that are not glamorous. Yeah. And I don't look at anything as glamorous. It's just work. But it's fun, it's fun work, it's entertaining work, and it's creative work.
Yeah, and it's the work you want to do. Therefore, it's not really work.
Right.
When I was looking, when I have a guest on, such as yourself, and I'm doing the research, I have a great deal of fun finding out what makes Debra tick. Why did she do this? Why did she do that? It's fun for me because I know I'm just a naturally inquisitive individual. When you were introduced to Marty, you enrolled at one of his master classes at UCLA, a place that I know kind of well since I went there. What was it that happened in that class that the light bulb went on and you said, okay, this is me. This is where I'm going. Television, I loved it, but it's time to move on. I need a challenge and I need a new career path.
Well, okay. I met Marty I had met Marty through some producers on another show in the building I was working in. And this guy got us all together for dinner. And some other people in the building also had worked with Marty on other shows and things. He was working TV for a while. So this producer got me and him and Marty and some other people in the building that had worked with him all together. And I remember that dinner. I had never laughed so hard in my life. And the restaurant closed after 3 hours. And we were still outside talking for another 2 hours, also laughing. And I remember thinking, how is it that somebody that's impacted your life without me even knowing it, because he had written many of these Barry Manilow songs that I grew up with, and kept me laughing so hard, how is it that you could just pass by and never see the person again? And I thought I was never going to see him again. The dinner was done. We had a very nice time. See ya. And about a year later, it took another year, it was 9/11 had hit, and the whole country was depressed, and especially, New York and New Yorkers. And a friend of mine was looking through the UCLA course catalog and said, "Remember that guy you met last year? He that writes with Barry, and he teaches a songwriting class." And I thought, but I don't write songs. Why would I care about that? And but then when 9/11 hit, and the class started in January, and so I thought, this guy made me laugh. And at that point, I wanted to laugh. And so I had asked the guy who had introduced us if he could ask Marty whether or not I could audit the class. I would register it, but I just wouldn't really participate. And so Marty said, sure. So I take this class in January, and I was just, ecstatic because I was hearing stories about the songs that impacted my life and how they were written and how they were created. And that's really why I was taking the class. I had no interest in writing songs. The problem was that first class, he gave an assignment to write a lyric. And I immediately, somehow, the 15-year-old in me that had been ridiculed my whole life for many years, especially in school, for liking Barry's music, thought, oh, I don't want them to find out I'm here because of that, because then they'll ridicule me like I was when I was 15. So I better at least try to do the homework. Now, keep in mind, this was a master class. If I wanted to learn to write songs, I would have started with Songwriting 101. But this was a master class, and everybody there was very experienced and great writers. And here I was not even knowing how to put two words together. And every time I'd ask, Marty, he would say, buy a book, go buy a book. And so I did. I bought every songwriting book on the planet. And I recently moved a couple of years ago and found them all in a big box. I never opened one of them, but I owned them all because I wanted to learn from learning. I didn't want to learn from books. So I took Marty's class. He only teaches it once a year. I took the class for 5 years. And that's when I decided I was done with TV. So I had been writing for, quite a while and learning the craft. But in between, I was back to my TV career. So it was only those 3 months a year that I would focus on writing. And the second year, I kind of thought, well, maybe now that I kind of have it a little figured out, I'll write some more. And I ended up winning the first scholarship that Concord Records and Barry Manilow created for writing lyrics at UCLA. And he selected 6 students to continue on for the rest of the year to work with. And I was one of them. And I won that scholarship for the next 4 years. So it wasn't just the 3 months that I got his instruction. It was the in between, the instructions in between, and getting together with the group and fine tuning things. And that's when it really, that one-on-one time is really when it started to hit me that I could maybe do this. But it was really completely 100% Marty's belief that I could do this. And that came from a very different perspective than when I started my TV career. When I was working in TV, or when I wanted to work in TV, people didn't believe I could do that, So I had to go with this from a place of, I'll show you, and that's why I worked so hard to become what I said I was going to do, despite other people's lack of belief. Well, in this case, Marty believed in me so much, I thought he put so much time and, and effort into, mentoring me. I came at it from a place of, here's somebody that believes in me so much, I don't want to let him down. So I better succeed, and I think I've made him proud.
Yeah, I think you have. We're talking to Debra Gussin. She is an award-winning songwriter, and she's worked with a lot of the top groups in the country. I think so. I know that I work very hard, if I can use myself as an illustration as well. My mother gave everything she had for me and for my siblings. And I adored her, and I miss her every day. And this Mother's Day is going to be tough, as every Mother's Day is for me. But I work especially hard because I don't want to disappoint her. But more than anything else, everything that I ever hope to become is because of her, and because of my brothers and sisters who have always been there supporting me and encouraging me. And well, except for one sister, but that's another story. She's a psychiatrist, so what the heck? But I know that all you need to have is that one voice. Now, you did not know this before. I'm going to tell you this, but I used to have lunch with Barry quite a bit in Las Vegas when he was performing at the Hilton. I would see him all the time, and what a wonderful gentleman he is. I wasn't the only one there. I mean, I wasn't but I would always go with a friend who knew him pretty well, and I got to talk to him a little bit. A gracious man, a nice man, and willing. And he reminded me of Jay Leno, who I've known since I was a kid, when I was on Melrose at the Improv, which back in those days was a lot different than the way it is today, Debra. But Jay used to hold court there, and he would help young comics. And so to hear that Barry does the very same thing, it's great, because I think we all need a mentor or that person that says, you can do it. Come on.
Right.
Don't listen to those other voices. Those voices aren't you. You have to live your life. Go and do it. Be there. And I think you've done wise, because you're extremely successful, and you've had an extremely wonderful life, and it's a full life, and you still have about 40 or 50 years to probably keep rocking it, one way or the other. You're not as old as I am, so you got a ways to go. How easy is it for you to sit down or when you're driving a car? I mean, where does the creativity come from?
It is not easy for me. I have to work very hard at it. My first draft of a song is certainly not my best draft. I tend to rewrite until I'm happy with it, until I've reached a level of freshness in the lyric, and it's just doesn't come easy to me. So what helped after I decided I made the decision to leave TV and focus on songwriting. was that I started to think, okay, well, Marty believes in me, but how do I know anybody outside of this room, thinks I'm any good? And so I started to submit to some songwriting contests, and I won the grand prize in the John Lennon Song Contest and the Lennon Award, and that was a big one. And when I started winning some other awards, I thought, okay, these different songs in different genres with different judges, in different, in different contests, so in different countries even. And so obviously there must be something here. And so I started to at least believe in there's something here. I don't know what it is. I wish I did, because then I could tap into it more. And Marty likes to say that he knew that I was smart when he met me, but what he didn't know until time went on was whether or not I could tap into the emotion needed to write lyrics. And I think that's where how I have that. It happens in the middle of the night. Really, I tend to write very late at night, and that's where a lot of the good stuff comes. I could spend all day. I could spend 18 hours a day sitting here, and some surface stuff will come up. But at 2 a.m, right when I'm ready to go to sleep, some good stuff will come, and then I'll stay with it and make sure I get it down.
Yeah, I keep a pad by my nightstand or inside the nightstand, and I've gotten up many times, lots of times, and thought of a question for a guest or 2 guests down the line. What comes first in most cases for you? Is it the lyrics or the melody?
Well, I primarily write lyrics unless I'm co-writing with someone, and then I can sing along with the idea. And it depends on the project. When I was first learning to write, obviously I was focusing on the lyric, so the lyric always came first, and that was all I knew how to do. And then I decided that, well, I better be prepared for other kinds of opportunities that could come my way, because a lot of composers and artists like to write melody first. And so I had to learn how to write to melody. I had studied musical theater for quite a while, and that also helped with learning to crawl into a character and sing from another person's voice. But it helped me work with composers and fuse the two together, because it has to be singable. And a lot of people think that if you just write a lyric, that's a poem. But there's a big difference between a poem and a lyric. And a poem you can read over and over again, and you can absorb it as in time. And a lyric, the person that's listening has to get it right away. They have to get it the first time, or you lose them. And so I tried to I take that into consideration and try to make the songs singable and understandable the first time around.
Aren't the songs the soul of the body? I mean, when you write for television or movies, it's an entirely different thing than when you write for, a standalone song like you're doing with Brian Lee with Weezer. You're writing Brian Bell, I'm sorry. When you write for a standalone song, it's an entirely different concept. I mean, you're really sucking into someone's heart in some cases, if it's that, or you're trying to how do I say this? You're trying to get to an emotional moment, I suppose, in one way or the other in someone's life. Real quick, when you're going to collaborate with someone, who do you collaborate with? I mean, is it someone you have to know their reputation, or do you work with people that you don't know much about, but they're very talented?
I've done all of it. I've tried all different kinds of ways of collaborating. Ideally, at this point, I like to work with people who are going to get my songs out there, and get our songs out there. I spent a lot of years just learning to create songs and working with different people. It's hard to collaborate with someone who's never co-written before, because I've experienced that with people not knowing that, and I would wonder, why is this so hard? And then they sort of let on that they had never done it before. And so they're usually used to writing on their own and having their ideas be the only one that matters. And so, that was tough. And once I realized that, I thought, I'm better off writing with people that have co-writing experience. And when I'm writing with an artist, I mean, in Brian's case, he had melodies that were already done and the tracks were already done, and he needed me to write lyrics to those songs. And so that was very different than, for instance, writing a lyric first, when I don't have a melody to write to. Writing to a melody is restrictive in a way, because you want to say something, but then you only, it might take 8 syllables, but you only have 5 to work with. And you have to really think of how to say that in fewer words and in a rhyme scheme. And it's a bit writing with your hand tied behind your back. But when you're writing with someone of Brian's talent, and these songs are so melodic, it's definitely a joy to have that to work with and have that opportunity. And he's someone, when I would ask him, the first time we wrote, I said, "What's your deadline?" Thinking, he was working on some project, and he said, "When it's ready." And so that was music to my ears, because I know that my writing gets better as the more I rewrite it, and the more I have time to think about it and absorb it. And I think the songs we wrote, which just released, just came out great, and I'm very happy with them because I had the time to develop.
Yeah. With that in mind, when do you know, though, that's it? We don't need to go any further. We don't need to rewrite this again and again and again. When is it the song put to bed, as it were?
That's a very good question. One, when Marty tells me it's right, because unbeknownst to whether an artist or a co-writer knows it or not, a song is never demoed or recorded that I've written that Marty hasn't approved. So he's very, very kind to me that way. And if I know an artist is going to the studio to record something, I'll say, "Can you just take another look at it?" And when he signs off on it, then I know. But even so, now I've got a lot more instinct than I did in the beginning. And if I don't think something's right, I'll challenge him. I'll say, "But what about this line? Can't this be better?" And so. But usually he's hard on me because he knows that's what I need and that's what I want. And so I know if he tells me something's ready, that it's ready. But there's times when a year after a song's recorded, I'll think of a better line, or I'll think of a better word that will have an internal rhyme that I didn't think of when I was writing it. But for the most part, the song is pretty much there by the time it gets recorded. And when is it done? It's done when the artist I'm working with tells me they're happy with it. Mm-hmm. Unless I really feel strongly about something that I know I could beat this line, then I'll see if there's more time to work on it. But if not, I'm usually happy. By the time a song is recorded or demoed, I'm happy with it. But that could take years too. I mean, I could work on a song for quite a while and just not show it to anybody until it's in a position to be recorded, because I just know that even if every line is great but that one line will gnaw at me for a long time until I get it. And it comes eventually, but sometimes it takes longer than other times.
How about the songs that, you hear great artists talk about, Barry Manilow and others, the Beatles, etc. Oh, I wrote that on I was watching, I watched it in 10 minutes, and it's a big hit. I mean, it's, Nights in White Satin. He wrote, the guy from the Moody Blues. I was watching him the other night, and his name escapes me for the moment. But he wrote Nights in White Satin in 15 minutes.
Well, a lot of times, and Barry will say, "Oh yeah, I wrote Copacabana in 15 minutes," but the lyricist took much longer to write the lyric. He'll say that because he wrote the music to Copa, and he had 2 musical theater lyricists that had met at a musical theater workshop years ago. They wrote the lyric, and that took longer than 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I think it seems to be in fashion and interviews. People say, "I wrote that in 10 minutes." I do not write my name in 10 minutes.
Debra.
So, that's my style of writing.
It's an easy name to write.
It may be, but if I want to get it perfect, and I want to see, as an outside writer, if you're an artist, you can really write whatever you want and record it. If you're an outside writer and you have to write something that an artist would maybe want to knock one of their songs off the album to record yours, it has to have it's held to a different standard. It has to be a better written song than something they've already written or that they can write. Otherwise, they don't need you. And so I have to write to a higher level than even when I'm writing with an artist. I feel that pressure, so to speak, to write to that level, because there's so many songwriters now. There's so many songs out there that why would anybody want to record my song if it's just really good? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of really good songs out there, but unless a song is different or fresh, or it comes at a topic that we all know from a different perspective, nobody needs to hear that. So if I want to make a career out of this, I have to hold myself to a higher standard.
And you certainly have. We're talking to Debra Gussin, who is the award-winning songwriter. You're on the Express with Gary Allan here, and I hope you're all enjoying the program. Let's talk about advice you give to young people, and then I want to get on to licensing of music. What advice do you give young people who are musicians? And I think for directors and producers in television sometimes, it's almost great that you already had a little bit of an acting background, so you understand actors. What do you say to young musicians today about getting the experience to write their own music? Because it's like a comedian writing their own jokes. There is kind of a method to it, and you do have to go through some ups and downs in order to get to that point where you find your particular niche. What do you say to young songwriters today?
Well, I always consider myself a student. I think probably as long as I'm able to walk into a classroom or take a workshop, I usually like to learn new things. I think even if you want to be a plumber, just because you know how to fix a pipe, there's probably new techniques, new kinds of pipes you can learn about. Always educate yourself and consider yourself a student. I know even Brian Bell takes, classes at various other kinds of angles of music, whether it's composing for film or TV or songwriting that are different from his experiences as a famous rock band. You're always learning, so always seek to learn and always seek to write better, to do better than you did yesterday, to know the difference between good and great, and strive for great, and acknowledge when something is just good. Because, but if you're a musician, if you read music, then you can play, music in orchestras. You can do all kinds of things. So, the more you know, the more luck will come to you. The more you're out there trying to do it, the more things will happen for you. A friend of mine is a excellent singer. He's just such a great singer. And he said to me one day, he says, "When is it going to happen?" And I said, "When is what going to happen? You have to go out and make it happen." Now, as a writer, I can sit home and write, but as a singer, you have to get out there and perform. You can't. Nobody's going to knock on your bedroom door wanting to hear your voice.
Yes,
so,
true.
It depends on what angle of the industry and of music you have. Your gifts are most prominent, and do what you have to do to be part of the community, and things will happen as you're trying to make them happen.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing as when I was a young actor in New York and in LA. The only way you can learn how to act and for people to see who you are is to be out there. You can't stay home in your room. And the same thing of being a talk show host. It's the same thing. Let's move on to licensing. You've been able to get landed a lot of licensing for deals, and a lot of writers would love to get that. How did that come about for you, and advice on that level?
Boy, me too. I'd love to know that too. A lot of it is even if you're out there networking and music supervisors, or you put songs in music libraries, whatever effort you make, you have to have the right song for that particular show when they need it, or for that music supervisor when they need it. And if you're writing songs first to write songs, I usually write songs hoping an artist will record it. But some of my songs are a little more universal than others. Some of them tell more stories. And when you're writing for film, TV, it used to be that most of the time they used underscore, or if they used a song with the vocal, it would be in a montage kind of scene. But nowadays, there's scenes with dialogue, with characters talking, and then there's songs with lyrics and vocals under it. So if you're writing songs specifically for that, or submitting songs specifically for that, you can't have too much of a specific story going on in your own song, because that's going to compete with whatever the story is in the scene.
Right.
So ideally for film and TV, more universal topics are better than specific stories. Like, that's why I think a lot of country songs, it's hard to place a lot of country songs because country songs demand a storyline and a lot of details in the song, and that's the opposite of what a lot of film and TV songs place. But it could be a scene where a song is coming out of a radio and it's a country song. So I'm not saying they don't get placed. I'm just saying that overall, in terms of scenes with dialogue, it's best to keep it universal and focus on the emotion of the song and not so much a story being told.
If I went to your house today or to your car, what do you got plugged in that you listen to on the? No, I'm not coming over to the house. I mean, I'd love to because I'm sure your house is absolutely delicious. But what do you like to listen to? Is it a variety of things, or is it one specific genre? Or I mean, for instance, for me, it's classical music and jazz with some rock and roll from my generation.
I tend, when I'm working on songs, and they're works in progress, I tend to listen to those when I'm in the car, because I'm usually thinking of listening for the spots that still need work, the lines that still aren't strong enough. And so I'm usually listening to those over and over again in the car. That's just when you kind of zone out when you're in traffic in LA, and that's kind of a good thing. When I'm home, there's a million things to be done. There's cars honking outside. I have to clean this or do that or answer emails or, deal with Facebook or social media, whatever. But when I'm in the car, I'm just in the car, and that gives me a sort of a blank slate with which to work from. In terms of music that I enjoy, I enjoy really a variety of things. I like country music. I like singer-songwriter songs. I like, Elton John and Billy Joel. And, I kind of grew up with that kind of singer-songwriter, Carole King, that kind of music, which is not what's played today. I therefore have to listen to what's being played out there today, to current contemporary artists, and to know, what I need to do to be competitive. So there's a lot of different kinds of listening that goes on.
Have you had a chance to meet any of your heroes in the music business?
I have had a chance to meet Barry, usually very, very briefly, but I've had a few photo ops with him over the years. And of course, the words behind the songs that meant the most to me were written by my mentor. So, but I've having worked in TV, I've met many celebrities over the years in TV, even in music. I'm still involved in the television industry, and so I don't know the answer to that. I'd have to look back and see who I've met and see.
I went one night to Pink's, and you know where that is, on La Brea. And for those of you who don't know, it's a hot dog stand on La Brea, and it's relatively famous. And nowadays, I'm sure the lines are very long, but like at 2 or 3 in the morning, one morning, who was sitting there having a hot dog? Carol Burnett and Lucille Ball.
Wow.
And I actually sat across from them, and I looked at Lucille Ball, and I said, good evening, ladies. I said, it's wonderful to see you out. And she said, hello, and in that deep voice of hers, and she called me over and sat down. Turned out my uncle, who was a comedian on Miami Beach, knew them both. And wow. I didn't know that. And we became friends and everything. I never, I only got the friendship out of it. They would come and see me perform at the Improv or something if I was there, or over at the Groundlings or something like that. But I got to meet the only person I really ever wanted to meet, and you're going to say this is crazy, was Carol O'Connor. And I never got to meet him. I got to know Patrick O'Neill because they owned the Ginger Man years ago, but they're both gone now. And I got to meet over the years a lot of friends through my uncle. I got to meet Frank, Sammy, and Dean, and I was very good friends with one of Dean Martin's sons, Richie, who unfortunately passed away. But I've gotten to meet a few celebrities in my life, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Maybe because I've been surrounded by that for all these years, I don't look at celebrities as celebrities. I just look at them as people. And so,
yeah, they are.
I don't really feel any tingles when I meet a celebrity. I want to know if they're a good person. And who they are inside, that impresses me more if I, get to know somebody like that than any sense of their celebrity. But that could come from, I've been doing this for a long time, but even so, even when I started in sports, I know, there were sports celebrities around. I just cared if they were a good person. I could sense if that person is a good person and somebody I would want to know. Yeah,
because sometimes what fools you is that they're nothing like the person that's what you see on screen. For instance, Lucille Ball was not the least bit funny off camera. She was very serious. Carol Burnett, on the other hand, was very funny. And I know tons of celebrities. Christopher Lloyd's a pretty good friend of mine. He's funny and he can be very serious. Other actors that I've met over the years and worked with, when I was at the Groundlings, I was with Kevin Costner and Bob Saget. They're both totally opposites of one another, and I'm sort of in between. The real after a while, when you're in the business, I think you do get numb to celebrity. It's like, okay, all right, big deal. So, you're here, you're over there. Okay, that's really wonderful. We've got about 3-4 minutes left to go. What's the one thing you'd like to tackle that you haven't been able to do yet as a songwriter?
Songwriting?
Yeah. Or anything in life. I mean, everybody's got a semi-bucket list. I mean, you're way too young for that. But is there something you'd like to tackle? Is there something beyond songwriting in the business you'd like to try?
I think I've accomplished small bits of those things, and maybe on a higher level, the same thing. But ultimately, even in my TV career and in songwriting, I just want the most exposure for my creativity as possible. And, I started out working at Wild World of Sports, which was pretty big, but, I worked on tons and tons of pilots and shows that got canceled after 13 weeks that no one's ever heard of. And so to work on the bigger shows like the National Geographic Channel and launching that and the launch of Fox Sports News and the launch of Dr. Phil and those are things that are still all these years later impacting people's lives and helping people and entertaining people. And I want the same thing, for my songs. I want the most exposure for my songs. And I'm not in control of that happening too much. I just have to write the best song that I can. And hopefully, the universe will cooperate and get exposure for those songs. But I want to help people heal and feel and laugh and whatever that song is about to touch people. And, on my small level, the people that have heard the songs do react that way. I just would like to have that happen on a bigger level, and hopefully my career will take me that way.
You have had tremendous success in television. You are tremendous success in your career as a songwriter and in life itself. And through it all, the ups and downs, the ins and outs, where you've been and where you want to go. Who is Debra Gussin?
How long do you have?
Well, we got about 2 minutes. We got about 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I think any person that answers that question is multifaceted. I don't think anybody can answer that question as I am this. I'm a lot of things. Personally, I'm a daughter. I'm a sister. I'm an aunt. I'm a songwriter. I'm a producer. I'm a friend. I'm a human. I'm a woman. I'm a lot of things, and I think all of those things, when pulled together, make me who I am individually, but as it does for everybody.
And you are an incredible young lady, and I am so pleased that you took the time to join us here on The Express. We've been talking to Debra Gussin, an incredible songwriter, TV producer, and really one of the nicest people in the world. Go on to Debra Gussin, GUSSIN.com. Check out her music. Check out the pictures. And if you don't think this is one of the most adorable women you've ever laid eyes on, then there's something seriously wrong with your eyes, because she is as cute as can be. And if I lived on Wilshire, I'd be picketing in front of her. Please have lunch with me at some point, and I'll even pay. But I thank you so very much.
I'll tell my doorman to watch out for you.
Oh, please, just tell him. The guy that looks like Jay Leno, don't let him in the front door. That's all there is to it. Hey, and I'll come in. I'll even give you a car. You just never know. But and anyway, Debra, thank you so much for joining us here on The Express. It has been a delight. It. I will be calling you probably in about 5 or 10 minutes or so, but God bless you. And thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I hope I was interesting. I hope people learned some things and were entertained a little bit.
Well, I hope so too, because I know I was, and I thought you would be a delight for the show. And again, like I said, thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
Well, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. And that just about wraps it up here on this episode of The Express. I'll be back with you next Tuesday night with Bernadette Duncan Harrison. I think she's going to be joining us. Remember to join me on Facebook at Gary Allen, youtube.com, Gary Allen The Express. Thursday night at 7 p.m. on the Diversity Broadcast Network with our sister station, as well as with the young lady that runs it, Renee. ProgressiveVoices.com on demand channel, and there's some other good things coming up. And yes, the website is almost done. I know it's taken a very long time, but if you want to get it right, and I've had a couple of different people work on it, and everybody keeps saying they're going to do this and do that, but it just takes time. Listen, thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to join us here on The Express, as well as everything on TMV Cafe. God bless you. Until next week, please take care of yourselves and each other.
You've been listening to The Express with Gary Allen. Join us here every Tuesday night at 10 for more captivating talk with Gary Allen. See you next time on The Express.